Tapping in.
Are we live?
Welcome back. Miles Xavier on current news. You know, every single week we look into what's happening in the news source and we reach out to y'all to let us know what to speak about, things that are relevant. Recently, RMT, which is the train railway network service in the UK, has gone on a 3-day strike on a strike that has seen 40,000 of its members walk out, effectively rendering the London tubing system almost completely at a halt. Only 20% of the trains and services in London right now are moving. People are in arms. They screaming at each other. Again, we've seen unionizing being put to work. We're seeing a union led by Mick Lynching speak out and say that a lot of over the times of over COVID, no one has seen a pay increase within that network system, even though they worked through COVID, whereas inflation rates went up. And so they've acted out in this manner. What I was interested to come ask you about, because you're an activist and you fully believe in people mobilizing in order to initiate change. When is protesting too far? Because people now saying that because of this interruption and this walkout, a lot of people in London are not inconvenienced in being able to move around. Doctors are not able to get to hospitals, and so surgeons are having to reschedule appointments. You know, there's a lot of people that are impacted by this. Old people might not be able to get their caregivers to come see them. So the backlash has been this is a selfish act by the railway network.
I think I love the way that you intro this segment because I think you touched on a lot of things that are really highlighted by this story that are related to organizing and how to share information, but also how to create disruption that requires people to pay attention and to look at what you're doing, right? So when you do get 40,000 people together as an organizer, I take my hat off to you, right? If your goal is really to empower people, and that seems to be what they're trying to do, the people that are at least working the railway, 40,000 cleaners, signalers, maintenance workers, and station staff were holding 24-hour strikes on multiple days, including Thursday and this past Saturday. And so I feel you, man. I feel you, right? Because there are people that do have jobs that are related to saving lives that rely on public transportation to get to their job. But so this is my pie in the sky as an organizer, right? This is what I would suggest in a perfect world. In a perfect world, you would be able to, your organizing, your network would allow you to get 40,000 people together, which is a lot of people. 40,000 people can't keep a secret, but let's stay in my beautiful organizing world, right? If you can get 40,000 people that are doing the jobs that you're trying to empower together, right? Hopefully within that network, you're also connected to some people who work with hospitals, that work with other first responders in different respects. And you can say to them, hey, we're organizing this strike. We want to make sure that those who are providing essential services are still able to provide those essential services. So here are some alternative forms of transportation that you can get priority to. In the ideal world, you would also have some connections to those transportation hubs to be able to say, hey, we need you to make some extra provisions for surgeons, paramedics, such and such on this day. Now, the problem comes in when you want to inform all those people that you still want to move around to make sure that everything can operate safely, but you don't want to inform so many people that the strike has no effect. No one is inconvenienced by the strike, and actually they feel like, oh, it doesn't really matter if these workers take this time off because we're still able to move around and do what we do. And do we really even need them? So there's a sweet spot there that's incredibly difficult to navigate as an organizer.
It seems that what their RMT is calling for and the union party that represents them is they're calling for 11% increase in pay. They're saying that they also are calling for the jobs that are supposed to be cut, the mandated job cuts, that would see effectively 3,000 people get their job cuts replaced by machines. and inside checking in, they're saying that a lot of those workers are actually going to be coming from the safety inspection department. So a lot of the safety inspection officers also risk getting their jobs cut, and so they're calling for an end to that. What's important, I think, to point out is that this is a conversation that's been going on for 2 years. It's not a conversation that is just starting now. What you're seeing is the last frustrations after years of negotiations of union taking act. But that's why I love coming here to speak to you about it, because I like what you said about there's ways where other organizations can work together in order to effectively still carry this out. I think that's very important. What Mick Lynching was saying is that a lot of the efforts that activists, especially unions, could do in the UK, such as a soft strike. This would be where they don't necessarily do 80% of all of the workers walking out, but it would be a phased in approach, or something as opening the gates so that riders can move in for free. That's a form of protesting, right? So it would still see people not inconvenienced, but it would affect the bottom line of the larger corporations, forcing them to act. But when you realize that those have also been made illegal in the UK, they're saying that they're only forced into a place where they have to make this decision. And as it stands now, Boris Johnson is looking to make that illegal.
Yeah, and it's a lot to pay attention to, right? Unless you're an organizer yourself, you're probably not really paying attention to the laws that they're passing in terms of different forms of protests that are acceptable, unacceptable, and the punishments that they're rendering for these different levels of inconveniencing the public, right? But you have to know that as a protester. You have to be able to navigate that. And so I think what Mick Lynch has been able to do, and the way that he's been able to be a charismatic leader that has been able to also know what he's talking about and not fold under the pressure of media scrutiny, and just try to represent the people that he's standing for. I think is commendable, at least on the in this particular area that he's representing his peoples. It's tough, man. I'm glad you gave me a little bit of space to talk about how complex it is, because in addition to some of the people that might be inconvenienced by the actual transportation, it's also businesses on the ground, right? They're saying that the businesses that rely on foot traffic were hit hard because when people can't get into the inner city, especially just for leisure activities, it hurts those local businesses. And so there's so much to take into account, and it's so important to extend that network of organizing to these people and to try and support them in any way that you can, right? Maybe you let some of these people have a pop-up at the protest because their businesses are being hit. There's different ways that you can work around it, but this is another one of those stories that really just hits on so many issues and is connected to so much of what we've already talked about, right? If you've been following us, we've talked about strikes in Amazon, in the automotive industry. This isn't an isolated incident. In fact, earlier this year, British Airways in the aviation industry, their workers voted to strike, right? So it seems like there's a lot of folks that are working these jobs that used to be looked at as a really viable way to make a living are now pushing back against the lack of increase in pay. That means that they don't make enough to get by on these jobs, which even if they're working a lot of hours, if they can get the hours, right? So there's these are jobs that I used to think of as like, you was cool, right? You was doing pretty good if you was working in aviation. If you was walking around with the pilots, bypassing security, you was good. So for people in all of these types of jobs to be responding this way and to be pushing back and to be organizing, I think speaks to a larger economic issue that we all need to brace ourselves for.
History repeats itself, because what I saw is they said this was the biggest strike in the biggest strike in 30 years, right? The biggest strike in 30 years. And when you read back at 1989, like what was actually being spoken about at that same time when they did a full shutdown 30 years back, it sounds eerily the same. They're crying out for the same thing. So it does seem like there is a pattern of sorts when it comes to it. So on both ends, and where it gets complicated for me, on both ends of the spectrum, on one side, if I've got my business wear cap on, I would look at it and say, okay, this this particular company is $16 billion down in revenue from when it was before COVID. So it's taken a $16 billion knock. Travelers are not using the railway as much. They're saying as much as 25% of there's been a 25% decrease in people in London using the tube. So there's a decrease in how many people are using it. And then, that from a business element, you could say, okay, that's what's happening. Also, over that same time, everyone worked through COVID without taking a pay decrease. At a time where everybody was taking a pay decrease, they kept their pay equal. Um, so it gets tricky from a business perspective because I'm thinking obviously that makes sense if my revenues are down and my bottom line is down. The first thing I got to do is cut jobs, and they haven't made that jump yet. But if you're talking from when you look at it from a larger perspective on who are the companies that are involved in this process of keeping these companies alive, sure, there might be a decrease in revenue this side, but we also know that over COVID, this was the largest jump in wealth creation that we've seen. And the UK and a lot of these other companies and a lot of the larger stakeholders of those companies have made an exuberant amount of money, more wealth created in this particular period than in the last 100, is what they're saying. In this short moment, these last 10 years, even accelerated by COVID. So there's been a huge, spread in the wealth gap split. And that's what Mike Lynching is speaking about, this union leader. He's saying it's actually about the split in this is a matter that involves the government making a significant amount of profits with the people that they're in business with, but not wanting to extend an assistance to the people that were working through that and keeping those companies alive. So it's interesting to see this in what is supposed to be hailed as the best banking system in the world or the best economic system in the world. It's quite fascinating.
I love how you broke that down because it is tough, man. It is complex, and I love how you gave that business angle side of it. Right, we're hearing a very similar stories from the oil companies, right, saying that hey, when COVID hit, people weren't the prices dropped, and we haven't recouped. We need to recoup. You know what I'm saying? How we gonna make good on this? And you're seeing that people are often getting the squeeze. So, which brings me to my next point, which is, I think my response is that it is a fight. It is a negotiation, and it is a business deal where both people bring valid interests to the table. But I think what we need to see more of is the people who are, like I said, cleaners, the signalers, the maintenance workers. We need to see them have equal power at that negotiation table. We need to see their interests reflected at that negotiation table. And they often say in business, a great deal, the mark of that when nobody walks away happy, right? But when you talk about this wealth creation, this gap, somebody's walking away from that table pretty happy if we're creating more billionaires than we've ever created, right, through these businesses. And so I think increasing the power of the individual worker, and not only the individual worker but the worker's ability to organize and to form a collective, will allow us to really look into the way that whatever resources are available are being allocated at that table, because if only the people with the power, if only the people who run the company have power at that table, then they're only going to scrutinize themselves and how they're spending that money so far. The other last point I'll make on this is that I think it's dope that, like you said, this is history repeating itself. Something that we big up on this show all the time is looking to our past to understand these moments that we're currently going through. But it's also dope to see in this particular case, like, new issues joining and making the connecting points to issues that are economic. So climate justice groups have also joined the RMT picket lines to argue that the government needs to make a point not only of investing in its workers, but investing in these public transportation systems in a sustainable way to avoid the worst impacts of global warming with individual vehicles, right? So to see people and organizers make that link and, like I said, expand that network, all right, cool. Let's get the surgeons, the first responders involved. Let's get the businesses that were relying on foot traffic involved too. Let's make them a part of the organizational network. Let's see how many people can keep a secret so that this still has the disruptive effect it needs to make a difference. And let's continue to organize from there. I'm inspired by what's going on.
seek out your local community organizers over issues that you care about. Miles over here is a community organizer himself. Miles, if somebody is, say, in Chicago and they want to get active and they want to get down with the cause, what would you suggest that somebody does?
I'm not up on ways that they are recruiting physical help from folks across the pond in this railway strike. So I would say this one
Not
is
the railway strike, just in general. Just in
okay.
general.
I was gonna say you're gonna have to reach into your wallets to help them folks over there with it. But look at so what do you do? What is your workplace like? Are you happy in it? Is it cool? Is it comfortable? Do you feel respected in it? Cool. What is your community like? Right? Are you happy in it? Do you feel safe? Whichever of those spaces there's an issue that resonates with you in, seek out the folks that are organizing around that. And you can seek it out on the platforms you're already on, right? Type in community and the whatever you're interested in, whether it's animals, community, animals, and your town, right? Put that in Instagram, put that in Google, and look at the people who are already doing the work. If you've been galvanized by the decisions that we've seen come down from the Supreme Court this week, look up women's rights. Go ahead and type that in, women's rights community, and whatever your town is. See who's organizing around that, and volunteer. We can always go to our wallets, but what I would encourage everybody to who looks at the world around them and wants to see a change to really do is see where you can volunteer your time. Where can you go in, whether it's take notes, clean up, whether it's put up chairs, take down tents, where can you contribute to the movement where the people are doing the work on the ground? That's all I got.